On January 6, 2025, the Trudeau mob got their wish. Justin Trudeau resigned as Prime Minister and leader of the Federal Liberal Party. Careful what you wish for. I'm Larry Fedoruk, and this is Later That Same Life. On each episode of my weekly podcast, a different topic, discussion, or story from our lives.
Season 15, Chapter 8.
Justin Trudeau.
Justin Trudeau is 53 years old. In politics, that's a kid. He came into this world on Christmas Day, 1971. 3 wise men from the East brought gifts. Well, I've just offended several subgroups with that remark. He was the first child of Pierre and Margaret, Maggie, and at the time of his birth, his father had already been Prime Minister of Canada for about 3.5 years. The elder Trudeau served as Canada's PM for 15 years, 164 days. First stint, 11 years, followed by a brief disturbance in the force from Joe Clark. Then a Trudeau comeback for about 4.5 years, until 1984, when he decided to resign, and famously after a walk in the snow. These are some news clips from back in the day, 40 years ago. See if anything sounds familiar.
The Trudeau years are fast coming to a close. For many Canadians, he's really the only Prime Minister they've ever known.
Some insiders were saying that Trudeau has decided not to make any announcement until after the federal budget, expected about the end of February. That's not soon enough for a lot of Ontario backbench Liberal MPs. They say they're going to tell Trudeau at the Liberal caucus this coming Wednesday that he must announce his retirement soon if the party is to have any chance against the Conservatives in the next federal election.
And that was long ago. Peter Mansbridge there, he actually has hair. A young Justin was in the crowd when his father gave his farewell speech.
And when I heard those tributes and saw those film clips, I wanted to tell you basically 2 things. First, how pleased I was and how grateful I was that my 3 boys were able to see that the line of business that their dad was in had some importance for this country.
Some quick history. Shortly after that speech, Jean Chrétien lost the leadership battle to John Turner. John Disaster Turner lost the election to Brian Mulroney. His government eventually lost to Jean Chrétien. Pierre Trudeau died in September of 2000 at age 80. For most of us, it was our first look at an adult Justin Trudeau giving the eulogy at his father's funeral.
He left politics in '84, but he came back for Meech. He came back for Charlottetown. He came back to remind us of who we are and what we're all capable of.
The whispers of a political future for the oldest offspring began almost immediately. The happy bundle Justin was followed a couple of years later by brother Alexandre, and 2 years after by brother Michel. Michel was tragically killed in an avalanche in BC in 1998. Justin also has a half-brother, Kyle Kemper, and a half-sister, Alicia Kemper. His mother had remarried. And a half-sister, Sarah Elizabeth Coyne, on Dad's side. Justin's real father is not Fidel Castro. Ergo, Justin is not related to any Castro offspring. Although those pictures that the conspiracy theorists post regularly of a young Fidel next to a similar-aged Justin, boy, that sure makes a good case. Too bad the facts get in the way. I mean, frankly, Mom Maggie in the day did have a reputation. It was partly brought on by herself, partying with the Rolling Stones, being photographed in assorted discos and nightclubs. It was hardly becoming a Canadian First Lady. She was a far cry from Marion Pearson or an Olive Diefenbaker. And there was that 30-year age difference between Maggie and Pierre. But again, the evidence. The Trudeaus didn't ever visit Castro or vice versa until 1976. Justin was already 5. And in fairness to Margaret, pre-marriage, Pierre had a bit of a reputation of his own. A swinging bachelor, sports cars arose in his lapel, dating the likes of Barbara Streisand and Leona Boyd. Pierre Trudeau remains one of the most polarizing historical figures in Canadian political history. People who lived through Trudeau-mania either love him or hate him. There's very little in between. Just put aside his views and his accomplishments and his tactics. Pierre Trudeau did engage a lot of young people into politics. Trudeau and the mania offered many young people an alternative to the stodgy days of Diefenbaker, Pearson, Stanfield, et al. The dapper dignitary. He would drop the F-bomb in Parliament, and that became fuddle-duddle in mainstream media. Well, you put it all together, and he got our attention. This last decade has been the Justin era, Trudeau 2.0, if you will. And it seems like for Pierre's oldest, your first home is the official Prime Minister's residence, going on official trips as a child, meeting the Queen, etc. How could you not eventually go into politics? After his father's passing, Justin became more active in the Liberal Party. He didn't run for election until 2008. Narrowly winning his Montreal seat, sitting as a backbencher during Stephen Harper's minority government. In my opinion, that was really the beginning of something that was inevitable. Once a struggling Liberal Party had a Trudeau in its officially elected ranks, it would only be a matter of time before someone would suggest that he run for the party leadership. Unfortunately, they remained in denial for many years. Jean Chrétien was a dominant presence as a prime minister, an office he held for over a decade. Justin Trudeau presided over his retirement ceremonies. Chrétien was a close ally of his father's, and after that the Libs hosted a lackluster list of hopefuls. Paul Martin, then the worst choice ever, Michael Ignatieff, the sad replacement that was Stéphane Dion. No offense to any of these individuals. They were just not leadership material. It got so bad for the Liberals that Jack Layton and the NDP advanced to official opposition. The Libs were reduced to third-party status. They won the fewest seats ever in their history. Ignatieff couldn't even win his own seat. Justin Trudeau became leader of the party in their 2013 convention, and in 2015 led those lowly Liberals back to power, a majority government, promising sunny ways.
Sunny ways, my friends, sunny ways. This is what positive politics can do. This is what a positive, hopeful vision and a platform and a team together can make happen.
That was his first victory, his voice a little hoarse from all the acceptance speeches. And what a difference a few years makes. From sunny ways to...
And it has become clear to me that if I'm having to fight internal battles, I cannot be the best option.
In America, the elected head of government has a 2-term limit. It's not so in Canada. Yet it seems that it's around a decade. A decade is as long as we can go before we want to change. Mulroney almost 9 years, Chrétien 10, Harper almost 10, Justin just over 9. This time around, though, it feels different, doesn't it? Before this, it was like familiarity breeds contempt. With Justin Trudeau, it just seems like a lot of contempt. Where's that coming from? It's not the same world, not even the world of 10 years ago. And can we pin this whole political climate on Donald Trump? Oh, of course. Let's. And let me be clear, Donald Trump is simply not smart enough to be the actual ringleader of people's crumbling faith in the democratic process. He simply became the face of it, the figurehead, with the best slogan, MAGA. The United States is not only the world's largest economy, but they are monarchs of the media. They're masters of messaging, backed by mounds of money. And they tapped into this unease among everyday Americans And that was representative of a worldwide discomfort, a disappointment in 70 years of post-World War II liberal democracy. It's not even that liberal democracies necessarily failed the people. It's the perception that they did, a perception advanced by the far right. Some simple history. I've covered it before, but let's go through it quickly again. Liberal democracies were born out of a dissatisfaction with monarchies. People wanted more say in their day-to-day lives. They didn't want to just live by royal decree. Your Highness, the people are revolting. And it worked. Conservatism was then born out of the kings and queens and a selected elite trying to hold on to power, wealth, and control. Liberalism, conservatism. That's the difference. That's what it was, and that's what it's always been. Except lately, over the last decade or so, somehow the conservatives have established themselves as the voice of the people, the champion of the common man. That's not the reality. But who cares about the reality? It's the voter perception. How did this happen? Well, the entirety of that is a whole other subject, perhaps for another podcast. But briefly, in Canada, the Liberal Party has held federal power for 70 years of the 20th century, and 15 years in the current century. It's difficult to be in power that long and not become the elite, or at least perceived as so. In my opinion, the Liberals, small L, big L, they began talking down to people. And at least in this country, we had the NDP, the so-called conscience of government. In Canada and the U.S., the left tends to talk about high-concept progressive programs. The right talked about groceries and your mortgage. And in America, this led to one of the most unlikely political comebacks in history, a re-election of Donald Trump. U.S. Democrats are in disarray, and only some have learned this lesson of condescending campaign rhetoric. And certainly in Canada, we know better, right? Well, even in resigning, Justin Trudeau took a few seconds to say this.
Pierre Poilievre's vision for this country is not the right one for Canadians.
Well, I don't know. If the Liberals have any hope in retaining Parliament, stop telling me what's wrong with the other guy, and tell me what's right about you. And again, that's not new to politics. For years, candidates have always tried to point out the shortcomings of the other guy, but again, now it just feels different. And I think now voters are just tired of it. Tell me what's good about you. Not sure if it's just too late for the Liberals this time around. The sloganeering Pierre Poilievre and Canada's Conservatives have a huge lead in the polls. Polls can be off, but usually not way off. And there's no magic wizard waiting in the wings, stage left, is there? Freeland, Carney, Clark, others. I'm sure they're all fine, but can they win? Not likely. Dissatisfaction in the Canadian government may be aimed at Justin Trudeau, but it's meant for the federal Liberals as a whole. Calls for Justin's resignation, they may have started last summer among some insider Liberal ingrates. Some are saying that Justin overstayed. But really, the problem was just bigger than the leader. It's Liberals and liberal democracies that have to change. You know, the news was out there for about 12 hours. All the news departments were saying, we have just learned that Justin Trudeau will be resigning tomorrow. We'll carry it live. And he came out and he did his little preamble. And then just when he was about to make the official announcement, he paused for a second. And I know that I read too much into this, but just in that second, I saw in his face, and I could hear in his head him going, wow, I'm actually doing this. I'm actually going to say I resign. I don't want to resign. To hell with it. To hell with all of you people. I'm staying. Up yours, Poilievre. I think he was thinking that. No, he didn't say it. He resigned.
I intend to resign as party leader, as prime minister, after the party selects its next leader through a robust, nationwide, competitive process.
And again, why would anyone ever want to enter politics? Even if you manage to get elected, The rest of your tenure is spent listening to at least half the people telling you what a crappy job you're doing. And eventually they just boot you out the door. One day you're a savior, and then in a political blink of an eye, they're calling for your demise. Thanks for your service. Don't let the door hit you on the way out. There are some parallels to 3 decades ago, 1993. The Conservatives did have a majority, but Brian Mulroney was becoming hugely unpopular. Probably couldn't win again, so they decided they needed a new leader. In comes Kim Campbell. Well, that's going to fix things. Only weeks later, Conservatives devastated in an election, down to 2 seats. See, the person didn't matter. It was the party. Does that portend for this spring? Perhaps. 10 years ago, Justin Trudeau was on a political tear, seeming to fulfill a family destiny, a winner, a champion, married, 3 young kids. Today, separated, ousted, changing his LinkedIn profile, updating his resume. And like his father before him for a time, Justin was a political rock star, not just leader of a G7 nation, but a pop culture icon. That Justin Trudeau, he's so dreamy. And, he'll do all right. He'll have plenty of opportunity to continue to be a world citizen. And it's too soon to talk of his legacy. In politics, that doesn't usually come until your state funeral. Canada is at a political crossroads, as are many countries around the world. And it's due to the rise of the far right. I wish it were only a battle between liberal and conservative values, but it's devolved. It's back to billionaires and oligarchs taking control. A return to monarchy. I'll tell you one thing, I'm tired of the Conservatives telling me how bad things are in my country. The country is broken because of the Liberals. And I'm tired of the Liberals telling me how much worse it would be if we elected the Conservatives. According to these competing politicians, we're either broken and nothing works, or soon it will be this way. I know it's not perfect, but we got it pretty good. I'd like people to be talking about that and how to advance that. And right now the Conservatives are having a field day with the Liberal Party disarray, the lack of leadership. They should not forget that in the last 20 years they've bounced among Jean Charest, Peter MacKay, Stephen Harper, Rona Ambrose, Andrew Scheer, Aaron O'Toole, and now they've settled on this MAGA clone, Pierre Poilievre, Stephen Harper's Pinocchio. So what happens? Well, we know Justin has stepped down. Parliament prorogued until late March. The Liberals have announced that they will vote for a leader on March 9th, the results of which should be known by the end of the day. That person will have about 2 weeks to assemble a cabinet, write a throne speech, and assume office. Once Parliament resumes, there will likely be a non-confidence motion, an election, and the Conservatives are likely to win. It's a Liberal hope that they don't get decimated in that election, and that maybe the Conservatives will end up with a minority, in which case the Liberals and NDP can work together, bring down the government, just like Ed Broadbent and Pierre did with Joe Clark. Then, just like his dad, Justin Trudeau makes a comeback and steps back into government. Pierre Trudeau made that comeback long before Donald Trump did. Okay, maybe the Justin Trudeau comeback is far-fetched, but imagine the same scenario under a Chrysler Freeland or a Mark Carney. Could happen. And listen, I'm not happy about any of it. You see those pictures every day of the Parliament buildings with the cranes coming out of them? That is representative of our country right now. Under construction, going through a major reno. Someday the cranes are pointing left, someday they're pointing right, usually they're pointing both ways. And like any reno, it takes much longer and will be way more expensive than you first thought. Unfortunately, we can't predict the future. We just have to survive it.
Later That Same Life is written, voiced, and produced by Larry Fedoruk. LarryFedoruk37@gmail.com. Subscribe to Larry's podcast YouTube channel. Get automatic notifications with each new episode.